Welcome to the Employee Advocacy and Influence podcast. My name is Lewis Gray. I'm a senior marketing manager here at Disseminate. My co-host, as always, is Elliot Elsley, our director of sales operations. And our special guest today is the hyper-talented Eva Baluchova, who is the global employer branding lead at Danfoss. Eva, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome. Would you mind just giving us an introduction to yourself for the listeners?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me and for acknowledging my hyper talent.
Of course.
As you said, I am a global employer branding lead at Danfoss. Danfoss is basically a mechanical engineering companies with over 42,000 employees. And at Danfoss, I work on a different initiative, and one of them is an employee advocacy program. That helps employees to share their stories. And just a little background about me. So I'm an ex-recruiter actually, and I'm in talent acquisition field for over 13 years, and I worked really for different type of companies from startups, scale-ups, and then now in the corporate, and as well like from different industries. So I think I have a good overview of how companies are hiring and how they are attracting the talent. Besides that, I like to write articles, train people, and speak at the conferences. And personally, I always say that you can connect me with a 4B, and that's a basketball, books, board games, and beer. A lot of beer. And yeah, that's a little introduction.
That's very good to hear. I'm assuming the basketball and beer don't coincide. Those are separate.
After one of each other, yeah.
I think
Definitely.
that the basketball after the beer would be an interesting game.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I cannot say that I didn't try.
Amazing. Well, thank you for giving us the introduction. So, we wanted to invite Eva on today because I had an initial conversation with Eva a couple of weeks ago, and I thought the way that Eva's managing an employee advocacy program at the moment is kind of against what we've seen previously, because Eva's doing things, unfortunately, what we would call the hard way, but she's absolutely smashing it because she's doing things without a tool at the moment. So we're going to dig into that, talk about how Eva has launched a program, is engaging employees and scaling and ultimately measuring the impact. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so as always with guest episodes on this podcast, we like to start with what we call a warm up, and it's just 3 to 5 FAQs around the topic of employee advocacy that we like to get our guests' take on. So, Eva, I'm going to put you on the spot as we do with all guests and rattle through 3 of these FAQs. So, the first one, I'm curious to know what's the most important metric you're looking at for advocacy content performance?
Cool. So I am looking into participation and showing up. So I don't look at the likes or reshares. I just really looking at the quantity of the posts that are posted for either certain hashtag or for the certain profiles.
Okay, and are you currently measuring cost per click from employee advocacy?
No, we are not measuring it since our program is primarily about investment. We are investing it by our time and effort, and since we don't have any tool, we are not tracking any financial resources.
Sure. And then lastly, if you had to choose just one thing, what would you say is the key to employee advocacy success?
This is actually a very hard question. I was thinking about that for quite time. So I think the foundation of the success is the encouragement or empowerment and that you deliver to your employees and how you're able to recognize their effort.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, that's something that I definitely got from our initial conversation. So I'm excited to dive into that a little bit more. But starting right at the start, if we think about your introduction to employee advocacy, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about we've gone into your role at Danfoss, but what was it that really sparked your interest in employee advocacy as a strategy?
Yeah, it's a good question, and maybe the answer will surprise you. But actually, since we didn't really have enough resources for employer branding activities, the LinkedIn advocacy is basically low cost tactic that you can choose, although with the highest afford and um long-term return of investment. But yeah, since if you don't have money, then you try to take anything what can be done on a low cost, and employee advocacy is one of the most effective strategies anyway, or tactics. I don't know. I think it's a tactic. Um, so then, basically, that was a choice. No money, basically.
I don't think you're the only person that's in that world when it comes to we started this because we didn't have any budget at the time and we needed to find a new way to get things done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like internally, my goal was as well to encourage people to have their voice, and a bit like reinvent the employer branding by telling people stories rather than creating that branded message, because I think the authenticity always sell the best.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Particularly from an employer brand perspective as well. I mean, it works from a marketing, from a sales perspective, but employer brand particularly, when you've got hiring managers talking about what it's like to work within their team, that is so much more impactful than just here's the kind of generic corporate post that says, hey, come and work in team X because that's where you should go and work next. And it's all a bit kind of drab. I think that authenticity from employees. I mean, I've seen it time and time again. Fortunately, obviously, we have a tool, but I have access to a wider tool to see everything else that's going on. Those like job posts are just so much more impactful when they're coming from an employee across the board. That they are just time and time again the most sort of impactful posts that you'll see in employee advocacy.
100%.
For the listeners' sake, I can't imagine many people are unfamiliar with Danfoss as an organization, but obviously it's a very large and complex organization, structurally.
Yeah.
But we've spoken with a number of people who are at large organizations, and I'm always fascinated to hear how this kind of shapes their approach. But from your experience, Eva, how has the structure and the size of Danfoss shaped your approach to employee advocacy?
Yeah, so I have decided for inclusive approach. Since we already have at the company a little, it's not that little employee advocacy program, but it's for it's exclusive approach. So that means they are picking up who is part of that, and mostly is related to lead generation and thought leadership on high level. So not everybody can do that, and so we have decided to build at maybe tier zero level where all employees can share. Um, and that was really hard since I couldn't at the beginning like choose like how I will gather those people. Since we decided to only run the pilot to see what are the common concerns. We didn't have 100% buy-in. So we didn't want to risk anything. We kind of played the safe card, and so choosing a people was pretty hard. Since we are like I don't know in many countries, in many regions on different business levels. So that was I think the hardest part. To find the people that will be part of that.
I think for a business of your size, that's just always going to be the challenge, particularly if you don't, have some technology where you can just go, hey, anybody that fancies it, just sign up here, register, kind of get going, and you'll kind of weed out the good from the bad from that perspective. I think trying to track people down. Did you kind of pick and choose people? Did you kind of look for hand raisers?
No, so as Lois says, we choose the hard way. So we did indeed just we created a sign up, and we first actually connected with our ERG groups.
Mhm.
What is I don't know if everybody understand what these groups are, but those are basically employee communities that are part of the DEI activities. So since these people already are like willing to be part of diversity, equity, inclusion activities, I kind of thought like, all right, they are already more proactive than the others, so they might be as well a bit more willing to do another extra mile on top of it. And so we first engaged with them. We got, I don't know, I think 199 signups straight on a first first ask, and that was surprised because I was like thinking, yeah, maybe like 50 will jump in, or but 200. So that was scary because we just had like, all right, we will be doing some meetings with them and little trainings. So straight away it become quite intense. But as well during the process, during the training sessions we had with them, we got slapped in the face where we again realized that, all right, maybe 199 people sign up, but but maybe 40% will show up. So then it was a lesser group, so more interactive.
I think that's so typical, isn't it, really, where you and I see this and we see this with all sorts of organizations. You'll send a initial, hey, who'd be interested in doing this? Everybody goes, yeah, of course I would. And then when time comes and that's actually like getting going into it, you just always see that drop off. We work with clients on this all the time where those comms that you first send out, the kind of call to action that you're trying to drive people into, again, doing it the hard way, doing it manually, it means you kind of need to pull somebody into a meeting and do all of these things. When you've got technology, it's a little bit easier because you just kind of go click the button, you'll end up in a platform.
Yeah.
It should take you through it. But I still think getting 199 people to hand raise off the bat, it's also just a really good sign of company culture from my perspective. Just seeing 199 people go, yeah, would love to do this, would love to be involved, provided it doesn't take too much time out of my day. That makes for a really, really good advocacy program across most businesses.
Yeah, and we can actually see like huge interest in that. So when we started just with ERGs, we start some, people say to other people in the office. So we start having more and more inquiries. Like now, I think now we are on over 300 people signups. So then we decided that we're gonna scale it next year. Still brainstorming how exactly, but we definitely see the interest, and I am happy to see that, because I was actually afraid at the beginning that it would be that opposite, that I would need to beg hiring managers to jump in, or every recruiter need to be participating, and so actually it was yeah, I'm happy with the interest.
I think this is one of the most inspiring things that I found from our initial conversation, Eva, is yes, we refer to it as going the hard way, but it encourages you to kind of find innovative solutions to doing these things manually. And I think that's where you've really excelled here. And one of the things that you mentioned is about the, having to do one-to-one training, as you've just mentioned. And
Yeah.
you spoke then about the fact that you asked people about their attitudes towards social media, but I was wondering if you could tell us maybe a little bit more about what you learned from those conversations. Were people saying, were they sharing about their attitudes, and did they give any reason as to why they might not want to share?
Yeah, actually, yeah. So basically, how we led this pilot was that we will have 6 months bootcamp training for all the member inclusively. And during this bootcamp training, our goal was to teach them become a content creator. So it was really like how you're building a personal brand, how to write hooks and cliffhangers and copywriting tactics, how to find the stories in their life that they are worthy of sharing. And then we teach them about LinkedIn algorithms, so those hacks that can help them to be effective. And as well, we teach them how to take pictures and videos with their phones. So we really went practically on that. And every month we had one session. So during these sessions, we could start seeing ambassadors, they are more ambitious, right? They asking more questions. They contacting you aside. And so with those ones, I was having like a one-on-one personal branding strategy coaching sessions, where I was really asking them questions and trying to guide them on what possibly can be their personal branding strategy. And then additionally, during this bootcamp session, we have been listening to the participant on what is stopping them posting, because we actually gave them a goal at the beginning, like would be amazing if they post between 1 to 3 posts weekly. And we thought this is so easy. And again, we had the we had the pink glasses on, and we as well very quickly find out that that's not happening. But only was happening with few, of course. So we have been asking them constantly on, okay, what's stopping you? What more you need from us? What extra training? And what I find out was that mostly their problem is psychological. Um so the insecurities, the imposter syndrome. We got a lot of comment on, but who I am, nobody's interested in my story, what I should write, nothing happened in my life. So we could really see that people don't see their value and the worth. So then very quickly we really shift our trainings into really encourage people psychologically, and really just give them spotlights and recognition, and creating some little challenges where we could highlight few people, and then we could see like that fear of missing out is a strong motivator. So when we start spotlighting somebody's else content, we could see that more people start being interested as well, be spotlighted, and wanted to as well post something similar. We could do it way more, since we have been only two of us who have been managing all this group. There is so much we could do. Uh, so that we could see. And the other thing, besides those psychological insecurities, then we really could see that people are insecure about their writing skills. So a lot it was copywriting related. Pictures, they don't have problems with the pictures. Mostly videos, of course. I don't even go to the video. People don't want to do video at the moment, so that's okay. But yeah, copywriting, that was a lot. Like they didn't know how to write. So really teaching them how hooks are important and how to maybe use AI for it if they don't know how to write it, how to use chat. That was definitely as well good strategy to go for. So that was, I think, the biggest thing, like feeling like they're not worthy of sharing. And then I think the copywriting kind of part was the second biggest things we learned that stopped them from posting. And the third one was that they didn't want to post the company posts, the company content. That was, by the way, by us created, staged, and maybe blunt. So they didn't want that. They wanted to really, how they see that our program was for them, like selfishly a bit, right? Like I will join this program so I elevate myself and not elevate the company only. So we as well really concentrated on that. Like, all right, you know what? Fully personal branding, internal or external. Let's teach you just do the personal stories. And of course, we realized that it's a win-win indirectly for us too, because every time they share the personal stories, 90% time is related with our company. Anyway, because we live in the job, so most of our stories are actually our job stories.
It's always such a typical catch-22 that people end up in. I've heard this before, which is, I don't really know what to write, I don't really know what to say, but I also don't want to share the company content because I don't like the way that sounds, and that's not how I would sound, but I don't know how I would sound quite yet. It's always a fun dynamic to get into with that. I think providing content, giving people kind of little ways to work with this sort of stuff and go, look, here's an article, here's a blog post we wrote about X, Y, or Z, and here's a caption that we wrote. I tend to find, and again, it's a big benefit of our platform, but people are more inclined towards changing your post copy that you provide them than writing one from scratch themselves. Even if you just give them a terrible post caption that, just doesn't sound like them at all, and nobody would really want to share. People will go, well, I don't like that very much, so I'm going to change this slightly to my own kind of tone of voice. That is so quick to kind of work for people from that perspective.
Yeah, but what I as well realize here that here their issue was often with our company post was that they have been worried that another 100 people will post exactly same thing. So they not necessarily wanted to change the text, but they didn't want to share it because another 100 people would share it.
Yeah.
And what we actually have been explaining them was that it really depends on their network, and that's where we realized they don't understand how the LinkedIn works. That
Yeah.
because we had few people saying like, yeah, I always see same post on LinkedIn in my feed. I was like, yes, because in your network you have only Danfoss employees. So you have to expand in order to be successful ambassador. You do have to start networking or start connecting externally, so actually somebody else see it. So that as well we have been preaching later on, like, all right, let's learn to network.
I have had that conversation so many times over the past 6 years with people, and there's a joy to it as well, because it's such a good problem to have, right? We have this. I've had CMOs of very, very large businesses say, I am seeing way too much of our business. I'm seeing everybody posting on LinkedIn. You go, it's kind of the purpose of this, but let's skip past that for a moment and sort of address the problem. And it's the biggest challenge with this, I think, particularly for some of the people that go, all I see is everybody else posting. I don't want to post because I don't want to look the same as everybody else. You're in such an echo chamber in your own business. Like, the only people you're connected to are, if the only people you're connected to are your own colleagues, of course that's the only content you're going to see. But also, the content you engage with is the stuff that's then going to get shown, and you're going to engage with your colleagues' content, so you're going to see that more. So it's so cyclical, and people really, really worry that, well, everyone must be seeing the same thing as me. And I always there's a really cheap way to show someone this, which is on LinkedIn, you can sort by top, which is the algorithm kind of sorting, and you can sort by recent, which is just chronological. As soon as you sort by recent, you say to somebody, just sort it by recent. That's what your clients see. That's what external parties see. You will not see any content whatsoever. You'll have to scroll for ages. People are posting onto LinkedIn every second in your network. It's just not that big a deal. But it's funny to hear, everybody has these same challenges. I don't know what I should be saying. When I do start saying stuff, everybody feels like they're saying the same thing. Everyone runs into these same kind of hurdles over and over, and it's just a time thing. I think generally as these things mature, people start to understand it better. I think something that you mentioned as well at the beginning about kind of getting people over that initial insecurity, that's such a big leap. And there is a really good advantage, which is if you haven't posted onto LinkedIn for 6 months, a year, or ever, you get a little unproven but inorganic boost, let's call it, on that first post. Every time you post on LinkedIn, you haven't done it for a year, you seem to get a lot more likes than you would for the third or fourth time. Which really, really helps people kind of start that process. But
sometimes it's a rabbit hole, because if you get boost at the beginning, then as well very quickly you start facing the reality where you just get then rapidly low likes, and then the ambassadors are asking you questions. Eva, last time I had this many likes and now I have this. What I did wrong? I was like, nothing. Just keep posting. Just keep
doing it.
Yeah. Just keep showing up. It's okay.
And
don't want likes.
And I think that's the biggest challenge as well, is not just getting somebody over that initial insecurity. Like, that's a hurdle to leap, and once you've tipped somebody over that fence, that's you're in a really good place. Building the habit to go, you need to now do this every week, every 2 days, whatever the kind of cadence you're trying to get them to. That's a difficult thing to instill in people. And I've seen people with calendar invites that they send to 500 people across the business, where they go like, Monday morning, 9 a.m, write a LinkedIn post, and all of these different
ready
things.
to post.
Yeah, it's a difficult game.
Yeah, indeed.
I mean, thinking about all of this, so firstly, Eva, I absolutely love that you're focusing on the employer branding aspect. And to be honest with you, I'd be pretty keen to sign up for this boot camp myself because it sounds fascinating. But thinking about everything we've just mentioned, I'm curious to know about scaling because, again, if we talk about doing things without a tool, it's something that can become more difficult with time as your program grows because, it's something that, you're managing a lot of these processes manually, essentially. But as your program grows and it sounds like it's snowballing quite rapidly, how are you managing the challenge of scaling your efforts, so with like training and things like that?
Yeah. So we have decided that we will be not anymore doing like a 6 month training program because that's just too much. So we basically now finishing. We build the e-learning. It's quite long, hour and a half, but we basically put all those 6 months into the one e-learning. Uh, the first module is really about the brand, so who we are, what are the social media policies, and really to make sure that people are compliant. If they decide to talk about Danfoss. And then the rest of the e-learning is really about the personal storytelling, copywriting, and LinkedIn algorithm. And basically, the goal is that every sign up will get a little kickoff, 30 minutes, just so we tell them what we expect and what's the program about. If they are very committed, they have to finish the curriculum. Since the curriculum, we can track whether they finish. And then those who are finished, only then they will be part of community. So so if they finish, we see they finish the curriculum, so we expect that they have certain knowledge. So we kick them into the global community that we were building. So, and within this community, we're utilizing really Microsoft environment that we have. So Teams channel, Viva Engage, and SharePoint. And there we are right now setting up really having a regular global community meeting. So our goal, again, we wanna encourage employees. That's our goal. So we're gonna put all employees together in the community meetings. There will be full room of them. There is always people who will not show up, and we wanna really encourage that the ambassadors start encouraging ambassadors. So we wanna invite ambassadors to be as speakers, give them that spotlight, that 15 minutes of fame. The best ambassadors we are asking to give us like employee stories. So we want to spotlight, basically we want to spotlight the ones who are active. So hopefully more fear of missing out will be created in others. So they want to be more active as well by themselves. And so that we do. So we want to scale it by these global community meetings. It's as well hard way, but once we truly create belonging, then we don't have to do anything. There is zero project management done. The ambassador is gonna do that by themselves. So that's the goal. So maybe right now it's harder, but later we will have a payoff. And of course, we are trying to secure some budget so we can get a tool for at least for the company content.
That's a good idea from my perspective, but that comes from a natural bias. One of the questions I had as well, just around scaling, and in my experience of working with kind of larger businesses, 20, 30, 40,000 employees, there's a lot going on at the business. There's a lot of business units. There's a lot of silos. There's, even from a hiring perspective, there's kind of silos within all of that. Are you starting to kind of segment those groups a little bit, or is that kind of in the roadmap for this, to start to say this is a particular business unit or a particular region or language? Is that kind of on the agenda?
Yeah, so we actually launched the pilot with the two different regions because we try to have a global framework with the local uh deviations, right? Because of course if you want to be authentic, you need to let people you want to have a localized activities, right? So what we now creating is like a central directories of all ambassadors. We want to train recruiters to work with this list and tell them like, all right, you let's say are now hiring, I don't know, sales engineers. Go to the list, filter them by the locations, by contact those ambassadors and ask them whatever you need them to do. Meanwhile, we're trying to create that all ambassador has their employee story. So we're trying to create with my colleague Philip, actually a library of brand assets, but it's a brand asset about the ambassador. So we're creating quote cards, carousels that are talking about ambassadors specifically. So they are the heroes. And then the recruiter can jump in, download, post. So we want to teach basically recruiters to be the localizators of the content. We will see now at Danfoss we go through, but at Danfoss we as well going through right now a bit of changes business wise. So we are as well waiting of how that will impact our activity. But again, we hope that this list will help people just go in, filter, take it out, and go.
Yeah.
So that's the idea at the moment.
It's a really kind of typical probably way to do it for a business of your size, which is great to hear. That kind of like delegation to local markets. Hey, this is your local market, this is your area, this is what you kind of deal in. That's your area to now manage, and you can kind of create these little pockets almost that become self-sufficient, and then you get to kind of almost just sit at the top of all of that and just kind of keep an eye on everything that's going on. That's really, really good to hear. And I think is a natural challenge for a business of your size. It's always going to be a challenge. The next part, which I'll read your future for you a little bit here, is as this grows, more people will start to come out of the woodwork and want to be involved from a totally different perspective, where marketing teams and different teams within the business suddenly go, hey, could we start to utilize this community for X and utilize this community for Y? And then you've got a whole different kind of stakeholder management game to play.
Yeah, I think probably in the future we would need to maybe look for specific ambassadors, like maybe for certain roles that we have hard times and maybe we don't have enough those ambassadors inside. Maybe we will be like recruiting, for a specific segments or businesses that we see that we don't have yet representation. But again, the idea I have like a representation enough so people can just pick and choose.
With the jobs that you do post, are you selective on those? Again, you're a really big business, so there's going to be some incredibly exciting jobs, and for use of a better word, probably some slightly less exciting jobs, let's go with, at the business that you're hiring for. Do you kind of, something I see typically with clients is they pick the exciting jobs. It's the VP of revenue kind of roles, it's the major league kind of directorships.
I mean, definitely I would like to have hiring managers more involved in the tools, but necessary, I'm not yet looking into the high level leaders because they are already pretty busy and very active with being a thought leaders and leading their teams. So I try to really right now below on that bottoms up build kind of like there's this book called Branding Inside Out. It's one of my favorite book on this topic. Like I want to create this army of employees that are on brand by themselves, that create this on brand culture with the on brand behaviors, and I think once I'm done with that, then maybe it's smarter to go higher. But I think at Danfoss, our leaders are already active. Like they are already there. They're already posting. So we don't yet have a big plans for going high with this specific program. Yeah, but maybe in the future, maybe if you ask me from here now, like I'll be talking about that.
Yeah, so things sound like they're snowballing very quickly. So it does sound like it's just kind of like when we
Yep.
come to it, no doubt it will inevitably happen. But Eva, I know we're kind of coming to the end of our time
Yeah.
together, and I've just got a burning question that I wanted to ask you before we conclude. But thinking again about scaling, how are you currently tracking the impact of employee posts?
Yeah, so basically we since we sharing social media channels with our product marketing, then we are quite limited of how much posts can be dedicated to employer branding. So we have decided that we're gonna concentrate in order to be fully authentic and really show the behind the scenes. We're gonna focus on hashtags And then, so create a hashtags, try to lead ambassadors to post as much possible on those hashtags. They're really culture related. And then lead candidates towards the hashtags. So basically, right now we have been kind of manually checking out those hashtags on monthly basis or bi-weekly basis. So it was pretty tough. And we had like in 6 months we got like 1,000 posts more than we before. So we definitely saw already a huge impact on those two hashtags that we're following. Also, we probably gonna do that, but hopefully with some tools that we can track it automatically without without me going there manually and count.
That's
Scrolling count.
a wise idea from my experience. Some of the spreadsheets that do start to exist around this get a bit out of hand.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I mean, you mentioned I wanted to get to this, so I'll just give the listeners a bit of insight. During our initial conversation, you'd alluded to the fact that you encourage candidates to check out these hashtags on LinkedIn. So I thought that might be how it's happening at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think that's brilliant. Again, like it's all around innovation and coming up with creative ideas to track this without a tool. And coming back to how we started this conversation, I think honestly you're absolutely smashing it. So hopefully anybody else listening that's currently doing things without a tool will take plenty of inspiration from this. But again, this is always my least favorite part of the podcast, because all good things must come to an end and we have to draw things to a close. But Eva, so that we can go and have more brilliant conversations with people such as yourself, I'm always curious to know, who do you think we should speak with next?
Yeah, so I have like few people that I would recommend. I think the person I follow the most when it comes to employee advocacy is Davidas Budginas. He is actually a Lithuanian. And he's like an employee advocacy coach, and I love his content, and his ideas often influence whatever we did in our program. So I think he would be the top, and I think my second person would be Brita Blansky. She's as well amazing, doing great job on personal branding and employee advocacy. So two names.
It's amazing. Yeah, we need to check these out. I mean, if this is somebody that's influencing the ideas that you've discussed with us today, then for sure we need to have a conversation. But Eva, thank you again for speaking with us. Really appreciate you taking the time. Everybody, of course. And for everybody listening, please go and follow Eva on LinkedIn. If you want to see this stuff in action, no doubt you'll see a lot of this. I know I do. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you very much.